Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. Primarily, we would expect in Middle East, Emirates, or anywhere in the Middle East region, or somewhere in Europe, where it's also almost everywhere now afternoon. Today is the third in a series of webinars that we have been jointly organizing. The first was on poultry, the second was on agriculture, and now we move back to poultry because we never have time enough to talk about it, isn't it? For today, we decided to look into the topic of biosecurity, which sounds not necessarily seducing, tempting, but it is so essential because still, when you look into it, it is the fundament of a safe and good running company, of a whole supply chain that functions if biosecurity is managed properly. And still we noted wherever we are in the world, not necessarily in Emirates, also in the Netherlands, wherever in the world where we are, biosecurity requires a top position on the list of attention. Promising opportunities in the investment of the poultry industry between the UAE and the Netherlands. Promising investments. What do we need to invest in? If it is equipment technology, also people, knowledge, management practices, so much that we could invest in when we talk about biosecurity. The webinar today, for an hour it will take, is focusing on this topic, organized again by the Agri Food Department at the Consulat General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Dubai, in cooperation with VIV MEA. We have two sessions. The first session consists of the welcome address of our ambassador and a keynote from within the region from Dr. Suhail. And then we move into the second session. In the second session, ladies and gentlemen, but also during the first, you can use the chat function to ask your questions. I cannot promise you that you will all get your question to be answered, but we will find ways also after the webinar to make sure that your question, if not answered during this session, reach the persons that you would like to reach and that you will get an answer. So in short, if you want to raise a question, just write it with the chat function, then I can see it and I will try my best to include it in this session. No need to wait, you can do it any moment as from now. We start, first of all, with the ambassador, Mr. Lodri Embrechts, Ambassador of the Netherlands Embassy, the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Dubai. Please join us with your welcome address.
Happy to do so, not from Dubai, but from Abu Dhabi. But still the UAE, it's very close, right? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to be here. And I want to start with an apology because you may think, why is this guy not wearing a necktie or a suit? I really do not mean to be disrespectful, but I broke my elbow, as you can see. So this is for me by far the most casual dress to wear, the easiest dress to wear. So hey, bear with me, and next time I promise you I'll wear a jacket as well again. Biosecurity. There are topics, and this is a very important one to my belief. Because the reach of biosecurity, this topic, the topic we discussed today, is enormous. It affects all of us, man, animal, and nature. And today's topic is not so much to tell you that the Netherlands knows it all and we have all the answers to everything. Absolutely not. And that's why I'm happy to be here today. It is about sharing information. It's about creating a stronger base for cooperation. And I think that should be the overall objective as far as I'm concerned today. Agriculture. Agriculture is key for the Netherlands. Make no mistake. The sector is one of the pillars of the Dutch economy. And even last year, in 2020, when, COVID-19 made us suffer tremendously in the Netherlands as well, our export volume was still hovering around $100 billion, which is incredibly substantial to I believe. It's not just the Netherlands, it's also in the relationship with the UAE, a very important part. First 6 months of last year, we exported 280 million euros of food products to the country. And in the first few months of the Corona issue in the UAE, we could see that the export of fresh food to the UAE went up to some 20–30%. So that says something about the dynamic. Today we talk about poultry in particular as well. And the UAE is the third biggest importer of hatching eggs from the Netherlands. So we're talking very substantial business here. We're talking something very, very, very serious. But the days that the Netherlands wanted to become the largest exporter of agro-food in the world, they are behind us. Absolutely. What do we want? What do we want? We want to contribute to feeding the ever-growing world population, now and in the future, in the best way possible, the most sustainable way possible, and the healthiest way possible. And here, biosecurity comes into play. Because, think about it, antibiotics, hormones, insecticides, given or sprayed on plants, end up eventually in the people who are consuming these plants and meat. And let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean. If we feed animals antibiotics, for instance, let's look at antibiotics. We feed the animals antibiotics. It ends up in the animal. We consume the animal, it ends up in us. The moment we get sick and we do need antibiotics, they hardly have a grip on our body because our body is used to antibiotics. The effect is very minimum, which means that we create pressure on the healthcare sector. People need to go to the hospital. People need to be looked after, so the society is suffering from it as well. People cannot work. So it's a kind of chain reaction that will come into play if we don't play it smart from the beginning. And that's why the Netherlands does not approach this topic in a very fragmented way. No, we very much believe in an integrated approach where, for instance, our Ministry of Agriculture and our Ministry of Health work very, very closely together. But not only on a government level, also universities are connected, companies are connected. And all this we set up to create a healthier living condition. We call it perhaps the Dutch model or the Polder model, I don't know. But the key word here is integrated approach. That is something that I very much believe in myself as well. Now, this level of care and responsibility does not only apply to food we use in the Netherlands. No, it also applies to food we export to other countries, of course. Now, in today's seminar, I already mentioned it is really important that we look at, are we doing the right things together? What can we learn from each other? Is there a basis to work closer together? What can we do in a common way forward? And that would be a challenge I leave to you, to experts, to discuss today. But if we can come up with 1, 2, or perhaps 3 ideas to do something together, I'd be very happy to explore that with you as well. Now, my introduction had to be short. Samar gave me maximum 3 minutes, so I still am within the in the limit, Samar, don't worry too much. But I really wanted to emphasize the importance of the topic and the absolute need to work together in this one as well. That is something I want to leave with you. And one last remark is that as a follow-up of this webinar, I'd like to invite you for the next one. That will happen during the Digital Trade Mission with the Minister of Foreign Trade of the Netherlands, Her Excellency Sigrid Kaag, and it will be held on the 30th of March 2021. Enroll, make sure you're there, and join us on that one as well. I wish you a good webinar. I leave you in the very, very capable hands of my colleague Samar from the Consulat General in Dubai and Erik Schmidt from our embassy in Riyadh. Ask them all the difficult questions you want to ask them. Come up with ideas for working together, even closely working together. I'd be very happy to hear from them what I can do from my position to make sure this is going to happen. We love to work with you, honestly. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope to be back on the 30th of March 2021. Have a good webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Ambassador, dear Mr. Embrechts. It's very clear, as you outlined it, that we have to look into an integrated approach. I hear myself double. Yes, thank you, because you looked into the interactive approach, integration within the supply chain. We all have to work together, and you specifically also made an invitation to us not only within the chain, but also between the UAE and the Netherlands to come up by the end of this session with action plans. Let's see how far we can get. Before we get there, I would like to invite Dr. Suhail Ahmed, CEO of Arabian Farms, to give us an outline of the situation when it comes to biosecurity in the region that we are talking about this afternoon, UAE. What have we learned? What is going well? And where do we have to put some attention to? Dr. Suhail, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for having me here. Well, where do I start? Let me start off with a couple of announcements first. A big, huge congratulations to UAE for the Hope probe mission to the Mars. Yesterday, the probe has started orbiting Mars. The first in the Arab world. So this is a huge, huge congratulations to all the. I'm not representing the industry, but sharing my experience in the poultry industry and almost 20 years in the region. So that I think that qualifies me to speak a little bit about the biosecurity. I would like to start my keynote or, cover 3 points of importance here. One is the overview of the UAE poultry industry, which is public information. The second one is the biosecurity itself. And the third point I would like to briefly touch upon is the digital transformation or the use of IT. Let me start with the UAE industry. We are about 9.4 million people in the country. The per capita consumption of eggs is somewhere around, I'm not using very accurate figures, but it's somewhere around 145 to 150 eggs. And per capita consumption of chicken is roughly between 45 to 50 kgs per person per year. This makes it about quite a substantial numbers. If we were to produce 100% in the UAE itself, we would need roughly about 500 million chickens throughout the year in multiple cycles. Now, we don't do that much of chicken. We are quite dependent on the imports as well. I think if roughly we are doing about 20 to 22% of the broilers are produced locally, 80% are imported, and at the same time, 60% eggs are produced locally and 40% are imported into the country. Now, considering these figures, at any given year, probably we are just talking about roughly about 110 million birds in the UAE. So 40% growth chances in the layers in the eggs business, and about almost 80% chances in the broilers segment to grow. So that's a tremendous potential in the region and a gap to be closed. So at the same time, the food security ministry in the country has been emphasizing substantially on the technological aspect of developing food, producing food in the region. The pandemic again has further enhanced the need for local food production. So all in all, I see a very bright future for the poultry industry in the region, and a lot of birds are going to be grown in the country to fulfill the requirements. Taking this into consideration, there's a lot of birds, and we need to take good care of them. Talking about the biosecurity levels. Biosecurity is a very, very broad term. It's a set of rules or procedures to be followed to control certain threats to the industry. Now, I would like to draw an analogy. I was reading the newspaper and I saw that Netherlands is going through a very big cold wave. And if you are to go out in the cold, you need to wear clothing which is in multiple layers. So similarly in biosecurity as well, it's a comprehensive and a collaborative strategy is required by all the stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean the government entities like our Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. They are the first ones who are going to draw the border lines and set the rules for all the import and export. They are the ones who are going to put a framework for establishing large farms. They are the ones who are going to decide which country exports into, to which country we export the products and from which country we are to import the products. So they play a very, very important role in the biosecurity. That is the first ring of protection around the country itself. Then coming to the farm level, at the farm level, you have to have a very strong boundary around your layout to protect the birds. That forms the second most important layer or the ring of security. In this, recently we have, last year we have commissioned a new project, a greenfield project for producing broilers in Avian. I just want to share a few words about the layout itself. It's a very large 8 million square feet of land we have taken on lease and built an integrated project there. So just to give you an idea, the boundary wall itself, like it's a 3-meter height boundary wall, a solid wall, 3 meter in height and 7 kilometers in the entire circumference. So this is the kind of, you know, the biosecurity level we're talking about in the country. This outer ring protects everything from getting into the project. There has to be one entrance and one exit. Then the government also sets rules and helps us with the layout in terms of approving the layout. How much distance in between the houses, where should be the broiler houses be placed, and where should the hatchery should be placed, and where the slaughterhouse and the water treatment, and the way we have to construct the roads network internally to prevent the crisscrossing of the clean and not so clean roads. All this is done by many stakeholders, the company itself, the consultants, and the suppliers themselves contribute substantially to making a layout, which is the foremost important thing in building biosecurity level. It becomes quite easy if it is a greenfield project because you're starting fresh and you can do a lot of things. But unfortunately, there are many farms which are built 10, 15, 20 years. Arabian Farms itself operates 3 entities. One is a 40-year-old, the other one is a 20-year-old entity, and now we have a 1-year-old entity at the moment. So you can see different levels of biosecurity. Even though I know what is right for certain companies, but at this time, I cannot change the layout. So layout becomes a long-term strategy for any farm to do it. The third aspect is the third ring of protection around the houses itself is the poultry house itself. The walls, the roof, and the amount of air you're letting in, and who is going inside the house in contact with the birds, the way you are sending the feed inside, the way you are sending in the water inside, all this forms the innermost ring around the birds. The stronger the ring, the better the biosecurity. And again, I'm sure in the European countries where a lot of birds are now on the free range farms, they are exposed to the atmosphere, exposed to the wild birds, and only you people know it better how to manage this thing. But I personally can endorse that, you know, if you have a closed environment, then it is easier to control the biosecurity. And the last part, I don't want to make it very long, but just briefly touch upon the use of information technology. In the last 1 year, there has been a rapid transformation in the digital arena. The pandemic has taught us how to work or operate in a different way, in a new way. We have suddenly gone digital. Many farms have adopted various IT tools to monitor the operations on a war footing. people who are not used to using laptops and iPhones or the phones have started using them now. A lot of people have installed cameras to monitor how the operations are going on. And nowadays, a lot of sensors are there to monitor the dynamically the temperature or the carbon dioxide or the oxygen levels inside the house. Even the dead birds, I recently came across an article where they have introduced robots which can which go around in the house picking up the dead birds, and then on the back on a small remotely operated vehicle, and then they can bring it out. So that's a huge development which is happening. IT tools, you can use it. Now, it was very difficult for me to organize, for example, in our company, about 20 people to get them for a training. It was very difficult. Now with the tools, we can use the Zoom, and then we can train 200 people at the same time. Communication has become very easy. Data collection has become very important. Artificial intelligence and analysis of all this data to make proper decisions has taken a tremendous step. So I think we are now moved from being a backyard farmer or farmers to a very highly developed, technologically advanced industry now. A lot of exciting period ahead. And I'm also looking forward to the collaboration between, let's say, the batch industry and the UAE industry, where we can learn a lot of things and exchange ideas, develop new tools for making things easier for all of us. Having said that, I will leave the floor to the panelists to discuss it further. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zahil, thank you so much for completing this first session, where you have structured your address around the structures, so to speak, of using rings. The stronger the ring, the better biosecurity. The ring around the country, the ring around the farm. You mentioned quite some easy examples, so it shows how simple and basic, I would like to say, biosecurity should be approached. And yet in its simplicity, in the basics, there still are major achievements that we could establish. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to session 2, the panel discussion. And again, most invited to raise your questions. I have a first question for one of the panelists, Arjan Groot, Director of Product Management, Business Development at Hendrix Genetics. Arjan, let's look into the first ring. And we also noted from the ambassador the relevance of importing the hatching eggs into the region, into UAE. Okay, well, let's say we import the hatching eggs. We import hatching eggs from Hendrix Genetics. What guarantees, what do you do when it comes to biosecurity? Arjan.
Thank you, Ruan, for giving me the opportunity to explain a little bit how important biosecurity is for our company, Hendrix Genetics, and I'm happy that I'm part of this panel and I can contribute to this important topic. Biosecurity for Hendrix Genetics is important for 2 reasons. We, as a breeding company, genetics company, deliver our hatching eggs, but also day-old chicks to around 100 different countries in the world. And we are really in the very top of the pyramid. That means that our birds will be reproduced in many different places in the world. So if we ensure that the birds are 100% free of diseases, it means all the other parties in the world, and whether they are based in the Middle East, United Arab Emirates, or in other places in the world, they will all have the advantages of working with disease-free products. So we do our utmost to make sure that the rest of the players in the value chain will have an easy start and a possibility to deliver top quality materials. The second reason is that we are forced to do it, because if we don't have our act together, the possibilities to export to other countries is almost impossible, because all the receiving countries have very many rules and requirements in place with which we have to comply to make exports to those countries possible. So it is a need and it's a must, and it is very, very important for us and for our customers.
Thank you. Let's then move into the next stage. Yeah, we were at the highest level, the hatching eggs come into the country. Then they go to the hatchery. Logically, then, Bauke Hamminga, I get to ask you a question. You are Director International Sales and Business Development within Royal Pas Reform, very knowledgeable when it comes to the field in UAE. Okay, let's take a hatchery in UAE. The hatching eggs are coming. They are disease-free. Hendrix Genetics or any other company ensured that all is good with the eggs and the birds inside. Then it comes to you and your technology and expertise to see what we can do there. Biosecurity in the hatchery. Please explain, what do we have to think of? Bauke.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben, for inviting me to join here as well. I see a lot of friends from the industry here, and I'm happy to share a bit of thoughts about what we think we can do on biosecurity terms in if we design a hatchery or on a hatchery as such. And if I hear the story of Mr. Groot, the most important thing that they have to work with is also the fact that these farms that the pure line companies have are never empty, and that is a little bit of a similar process that we have in the hatchery. And that means that once you have developed a hatchery and you are actually operating the hatchery, it will never ever be free from live material, from embryos, from day-old chicks. It will always be full. It will never be 100% empty, so that you could have the opportunity to clean it properly again. So we have to try to design it in such a way that we can clean it in the best way while we are working with the process that is continuously ongoing. And what you also should realize is that the hatchery can be a multiplying factor on any disease in a production process, but it does not have to be. And we have to make sure that that role that we have in there, that we play it properly. Yeah. And I can show you one slide if you allow me. If you allow me.
Please do so. Yes.
Yeah.
Should I allow you to do that in a way?
Yeah, no, you don't have to share. I'm not that keen.
Yes, we can see it.
Here we go. Well, what you have to realize is that if your hatchery is reproducing a disease, yeah, that only one entry with a disease may spread to several farms. So this is the crucial role that a hatchery plays in disease transfer. And so it's important for the hatchery even more than for a breeder farm or a broiler farm or a layer farm, because they, at a certain stage in their production, empty, and we never empty. So what we try to do in our hatchery is to design routings in a hatchery so that we have the minimum of interaction between the different products that we bring in. I'll try to take you through that. We have, for instance, an egg handling area where we bring in farm trolleys with trays with eggs on them. And the trolleys that have been at the farm can potentially bring in a disease. So we try to keep them just going through one piece of the hatchery, and I will explain to you in a minute. And then afterwards, the eggs are placed on a setter trolley. They go into the setting area where they remain 18 days. But here our carrier again has a contact with the hatchers, because here we do our transfer and kennelling process. And from there, we bring them to hatches, and from hatches, we bring them to chick handling. And in these hatcheries, we also have dirty chick boxes come back into the hatchery that have to be washed. So what we try to do is to separate these flows in a properly set up hatchery. And that means that if a truck comes in with farm trolleys, we actually unload farm trolleys, we transfer them here onto setter trolleys, and then the setter trolleys go into the incubation process, whereas we bother ourselves by washing the farm trolleys, storing them again, and bring them out to the farm. But this is a closed circle that hardly interferes with the following circle, which is the setter trolley. Obviously here there is a moment of interaction, but then they go into 18.5 days of incubation. Yeah, they go over a transfer line and come back to be washed and stored as a clean setter trolley again. And these setter trolleys do not go to farms. It's only farm trolleys that go to farms. So the setter trolleys remain in the hatchery and remain clean in the hatchery. From here, We do the transfer process where we fill up the hatcher baskets and we fill our hatches for the hatching process that takes 3 days. From there, we take off the day-old chicks, but the hatcher baskets again get washed here. And that is the next cycle. That is the red cycle you can see. And that again is the red cycle that we try not to have crisscross with any of the other cycles. And as the last part, we have the cycle of the returning chick boxes that come in, go over a counting process, and go out of the hatchery towards the farms. Now, it's very important not only to keep these routings separate and not to have them crossed, but also to have a one-way flow of traffic in the climate control that we do in the hatchery. And that basically goes from a positive pressure at the incubator side towards a negative pressure at the hatcher side and at the chick side, so that we always have a flow from the clean side towards the dirty side. If you open up a door in a setter room, because it is overpressure, you will never have air flow into that setter room. The only place it will flow to is out of the setter room. And that is how we try to make these separations in the process. And as I said at the start, especially because we are always full. This is I would say that is the problem of what we have to deal with in hatchery. Is that helping a bit, Ruwan?
I would say it helps a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, what we can see also in Dr. Suhail's keynote address, it's all about clean, separating clean from dirty. It's about routing, making sure, yes, of course, there's interaction, but limit the points of contact when it comes to technology and when it comes to people. I think you made it very clear when it comes to the hatchery. I would also like to look into, for instance, a broiler farm. Brian van Hoof, director at VDL Agrotech and Janssen Poultry Equipment. Brian, you are our expert today to look into, for instance, a broiler farm when it comes to clean and dirty and separation, when it comes to the layout and the design. Brian, I would like to invite you to give your view on biosecurity at the broiler farm.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. A pleasure to be part of this webinar. And the speakers we just heard, they were emphasizing the biosecurity and hygiene in their link of the total chain. As important as the biosecurity, both for Hendrix's and also for Pastoral Farm and the hatchery, biosecurity and broiler farms is also very important. We receive in the broiler farms the live chicks, day-olds, which we have to grow until the slaughter age, which in the Middle East is mostly up to 1.4, 1.5 kilogram live weight, but in other areas can go up to even 2.5 to 3 kilograms, 6 to 6.5 weeks total lifespan. The biosecurity, I would like to point out the biosecurity starts on the farm level. On farm level, you have to design the farm in such a way that you separate the dirty and the clean roads. The dirty roads are in principle the roads that take out litter, take out residues from the farm, and the clean roads are the ones that bring in the chicks, that bring in the feed. If you mix up these two routes, then you increase the risk of contamination, which should at all times be avoided. So incoming and outgoing traffic is the feed delivery trucks and other service-related traffic. The layout design of the houses, also very important. If you have a site with more than one house, always make sure that the layout of the house is designed in such a way that there will never be a risk of dirty air exhausting from one building entering any of the other buildings. So all incoming air should always be clean and not contaminated by any of the other buildings. In general, we advise our customers to minimize the traffic from outside. The less traffic, the less risk of contamination. An example is the placement. What we see more and more often nowadays is the placement of the farm silos outside the perimeter of the project. So we have the houses, we have the main feed silos just outside the fence. So there's no need for the feed truck to enter the project itself. And the feed is then transported from the main silos by a transport system to the farm silos per building. So the feed delivery trucks and such setup don't have any access to the farm. For bigger farms where different age groups are applied, it's important that there is no cross traffic between the houses with the different ages. If you have houses with day-old chicks, you don't want them to be mixed up in a very close, from very close distance with houses with birds 4 to 6 weeks old. Always make sure to keep the clean and dirty areas very well apart. The workers on the farm are also a risk. Of course, they're necessary to do the job there, but they're also a risk of contaminating, spreading diseases, spreading bacteria. So the workers on the farm, always designate them to a specific house or an area. This way you prevent contamination from one house to the other. In many cases, the number of workers per house is high, and this also again increases the risk of contamination. Strict rules should be applied to instructing the people about their movements. Try to have a person or multiple persons dedicated to one specific house rather than having them move from one house to the other and increasing the risk of disease spreading. On equipment level, that's when we go inside the house. All equipment is designed to allow easy cleaning and disinfecting, especially in broilers because the cycles are relatively short. So after every cycle, the house needs to be cleaned, disinfected, and this includes also all of the equipment. So when designing the equipment, we have to make sure that all components are easily accessible. So when cleaning, whoever cleans the house can easily clean the equipment. So make sure your surfaces are smooth and also designed in such a way that the workers can easily distinguish a clean from a dirty product. So once they have cleaned the house, they always need to check, go through the house, see if everything is properly cleaned. So if you design your systems in such a way that it's easy for the workers to distinguish clean from dirty, it makes the cleaning process a lot easier and more efficient. Another thing, the feeding systems are automatically filled. So we don't need people to enter the house to fill the hoppers of the feeder lines. So less traffic in the house also means less risk. And in many cases, we also advise there where unrestricted feeding is applied, which in many cases in broiler houses is the case, is to regularly let the birds empty the feeders. In this way, you will always have a good quality fresh feed inside the pan. There will be no old and stale feed, which again can cause diseases and other risks of spreading. At Janssen, we also have a broiler cage, which is different from the regular systems for keeping birds on a litter area. When using the broiler cages, the big advantage is that the birds live on a clean mesh surface. So it's a plastic mesh floor in the cage, which is even flexible also, so comfortable for the birds. But the biggest advantage is that the birds are always living a clean surface. So they're not in touch with the manure. The manure drops on a belt underneath the floor, and regularly this manure is removed from the house. Also contributing to a much higher air quality inside the house, which is also a very important aspect in keeping the health of the birds on a good level. Another point, very important, is the drinking systems. I think Dr. Sahel also mentioned it in his presentation earlier on. The drinking system starts at the point where the water enters the house. So important always is to make sure that you have a good and clean source of water that you can administer to the birds. The birds need to have clean and fresh drinking water at all times. And very often also medication is administered through the drinking water. Vaccinations, proper normal medication procedures. And for this purpose also, it's very important that your drinking system is always clean and operating in a proper way. and needs to be clean from the inside, prior to, but also after vaccination or medication. For this, we have designed a system that automatically flushes your drinking lines. So after medication or after vaccination, you can automatically or manually flush your drinking lines. So all residues are removed from inside the tubes, and there will be no film buildup at the inside of the tubes, which can later on cause problems to the health of your birds. I think with these 3 points regarding the equipment, we cover more or less the biosecurity as we regard it from VDL Janssen's side, and from the farm level, what I described earlier on, the layout, clean and dirty areas, layout between the houses is very important and contributes to much better biosecurity on your farm. This gives you a bit of an impression of the way we look at
very much so, Brian. And what I particularly like to emphasize, what you added to the discussion, clean water. Water is something to look into, feed, make sure it's safe, but also very important that we do not forget the air flows, what comes in the farm when it comes to air and what goes out, because there's also, of course, very invisible, when you talk about clean and dirty and separation, this is an invisible part that we should not forget to address. Ladies and gentlemen, I get quite a feeling of comfort and discomfort when I look into parallels with the current COVID crisis. Yes, we have a lot of systems, techniques, routings when it comes to avoiding infections between people. But what is also very important, of course, is, and that's where when it comes to COVID it goes quite wrong, people do not stick to what we agree to do. And that's why I'm also happy that we have Ben Dellard, Secretary General at Avian, as part of the panel. Ben, specifically because you work within the AI Global Expert Group of the International Egg Commission, you have a lot of expertise when it comes to biosecurity, even more so when it comes to people behavior, following rules and regulations. You have your own manual set up. What are the top 3 points in your manual when it comes to ensuring people behavior and responsibility are well taken care of? Ben, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be able to give you some ideas that we developed both in the Netherlands, but also worldwide. Since in this webinar, I represent not only the Dutch poultry and egg industry in an organization called Avian, representing the farmers and the parent stock and grandparent stock farmers, included hatcheries and slaughterhouses and egg traders and egg processors, but also the International Egg Commission, being the global organization of producers and traders in eggs and egg products. And within that global organization, we have the so-called Avian Influenza Global Expert Group. And you already draw the parallel between COVID and animal diseases. And I think especially in avian influenza, you see a lot of similarities. That global expert group consists of the top world scientists working in the field of avian influenza, together with people from the industry. And the main goal of that group is in fact preventing avian influenza to spread all over the world and to come into our farms. And what we have done there, and that is especially related to the mindset of people in our industry and also farmers or executives within integrations. And I will try to share my screen. Let me see. I hope that you can see this.
Yeah, yes, we can see.
Yeah. So this is an example what we developed within this AI Global Expert Group. Is in fact, this is a booklet. It's a practical biosecurity checklist, giving advice and giving practical tips and tricks, including some checklists on what you have to think about on biosecurity. And in fact, it consists of all the elements that was just mentioned by the previous speakers. So for those who need to learn a bit more about this, you can always take a look at this biosecurity checklist. Apart from that, We've also made several posters that can be used at the farm or on other places to explain the major rules on biosecurity. In the Dutch situation, we in fact work according to the 3 pillars that work very well in the Dutch situation. And maybe Dutch people are a bit more liberal and free thinking and a bit more difficult law abiding than, for example, Chinese people are. So for the Dutch situation, and I think this is also a good model that can be used in other countries, and it is used also in other European countries, apart from all the legislation that comes from the government, we have set some, on top of that, we have set a whole rule of hygiene measures in private quality standards that are made by the industry themselves. And the advantage of making it by the industry themselves is that you only think about practical and logical measures to be taken that can also be implemented and fulfilled in a practical way on the farm or in a hatchery or on a parent stock farm, etc. And even in a slaughterhouse and at an egg packing station. It also consists of a checklist. We call it a hygiene scan that can be used by every farmer to tick the box whether or not he has fulfilled these requirements. And if there's something still missing, it always sets him in thinking, what can I do to fulfill also that part of the checklist. This is all part of the education part, including sharing tips and tricks through websites or newsletters and webinars like this. The other important thing is the ensuring of the enforcement through this private equality scheme and taking care of controls on the farm, that people are also working according to these rules and regulations. And the third pillar is that we do research on biosecurity and what can we further learn from this research. For example, at the moment, we have a large research project running. It is a video camera monitoring on everything that goes inside and outside the poultry barn, not only people, but also rodents and birds entering the farm, to learn about the system that is behind it and to learn what extra measures you can take to prevent diseases to be further spread. So the 3 pillars: education, ensuring informants, and research. In our country, that works very well in having the mindset in a way that people are aware that they need to do something on biosecurity, and it's not a choice, but in fact something that you all need to do. So I hope
Thanks,
that
Ben.
answers the question.
Yes, very much so, because it gives an insight in the manual itself that should help, of course, to enhance moral responsibility to not only know, but also to act. I'm interested, if I'm a farm owner, Ben, and I use this scan that you just referred to, who should I, within my farm, as key people, embrace, involve with the scan so that they also realize what are the essentials and not only realize it, but act upon it? What people within the farm are key to include when you make this scan?
Yeah, what we do in the situation in the Netherlands is that, of course, this is a very interesting document to discuss with your veterinarian, either your own veterinarian, or in situations in the world where you talk more about integrated farming than the company's veterinarian, that you use this checklist and you discuss with him what can I further improve to have even better results as it was so far.
And Dr. Suhail, can you hear me? I hope you can, Dr. Suhail, because I would like to ask you then a question. What is happening at the moment when you are trying as a sector and as a farm owner also to create involvement of the key people into acting upon biosecurity?
Well, I personally believe biosecurity is not about key people. It's about every single person of the company. It's about developing a culture of following every single rule. You know, basically, I would define culture as something which you do when nobody is watching you. So in our companies, at least, we make sure that even the simple, you know, the worker who is working in a house, he understands the importance of a certain set of rules which he is supposed to follow, like changing uniforms, or, you know, using the food dips, or, you know, not allowing anybody else, and, you know, keeping the birds away, closing the doors. These are very simple things. Even his contribution at that level is very, very huge. Nobody is going to sit behind him and watch what he is doing on a day-to-day basis. So he himself has to understand that. So we spend a lot of our time in making sure that every single person in the company who is involved in the production areas, at least, understands the importance of the biosecurity, and they understand the transmission of bacteria or viruses to some extent, not to the technical level, but to some extent. Of course, you do have some key people like the quality manager, the production manager, and in fact, every other manager who is working in the company, whether he is a logistics manager or a human resource manager, everybody in a poultry organization needs to understand what is biosecurity and how important it is for the business. Yeah, so
Thank you.
I don't think it's about key people, it's about everybody.
It is indeed about everybody. And interesting, as you mentioned, culture is what people do, or what we all do when nobody watches us. Ben also mentioned using cameras whatsoever, not necessary to control, but it is a way of using IT also when it comes to biosecurity. And my question to all the panelists, and I would like to start, Arjan, with you first. What ideas do you have specifically, and or thoughts when it comes to IT, data, and biosecurity? Arjan, what can you say about that?
Yeah, well, as I've mentioned in my first answer, the key start is the biosecurity. It is all about people. I fully agree with what Dr. Suhail just said. It is all about people. It's the mindset. So it's also important to transfer knowledge to people. And that's also what we do. Our job does not finish when we deliver hatching eggs or day-old chicks to our customers in the Middle East. No, then it just starts. So we work closely together with the people that work with us. And that's also what was mentioned in the presentation of the ambassador, Mr. Embrechts, also in the presentation of Dr. Suhail. It's about collaboration. It is about working together. So we do a lot of trainings together with our customers in the Middle East. Just an example, it's not too long ago, it was January 21st. We had a biosecurity seminar, so it's the same topic because it's so important, with our customer Al Wataniya in Saudi. I think quite a lot of the eggs produced in Al Wataniya might be exported to the United Arab Emirates, yes? So we had a seminar about biosecurity in which our people called in the people from Al Wataniya, and our distributor Al Bayat, who represents us in the Middle East and also ships day-old chicks to United Arab Emirates, and we were all working together. The FED was talking about biosecurity, but also about vaccination programs, because effective disease control is not only about biosecurity, it's in combination with vaccination programs. So a lot of discussion, working together, collaboration to ensure that our customers will be happy and will make money with the products that we deliver.
Thank you. Bauke, when you look into PAS reform, designing of your equipment, your technology, and using IT, in what way do you do that to tackle biosecurity? Bauke?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously, I mean, this is maybe coincidentally because I wanted to be in a quiet place in the company. And so I've been set up in a room that's called Smart Care at the back of my head. You can see that, and that is basically what we are now implementing for the last, I would say nearly the last 17, 18 years, which is a component of training people when they are here, and that is especially has come up over the last couple of years, it's also making collaborative agreements with clients in the world, in which we actually we analyze that data, and we have regular what we call Skype calls, or it can be Zoom calls or Teams calls, in which we have a set of experts from our side and a set of experts of the customer, and on a regular basis we actually analyze all the data that they have, and that may be data related to hatchability and hatcher fertiles, but it may also relate to the changing of the use of your cleaning materials that you use in a hatchery, or improving things on the routing that you do in your hatchery, or climate-related issues as well. We can, on a distance, actually see very detailed results in hatcheries. I mean, we can do even simple preventive maintenance things, like taking over air handling units. We can see when air handling units are blocked, when they are too dirty. We can then take them over on a manual mode, have people change a sensor and then put them back on automation. This is all in line with our view for the future, where we say we want to have the complete automated hatchery, the autonomous hatchery. That is our, what we call our dot on the horizon. That is where we eventually want to go. And that is something I think all of our industries have a little bit of a dot on the horizon in that respect, but we are very practically trying to work towards that goal. And a part of it is training people. And if you train people, that is how you bring what Dr. Sohail says, that is how you bring it into the minds of people, and that everybody does it. Well, this is the way we try to make sure it's a one-day training course in a year or a week, but that we do it on a continuous basis.
Thank you, Bauke.
Yeah.
Brian, of course, the same question for you then. In what way are you practically incorporating IT in your systems and equipment within VDL Agrotech and Janssen Poultry equipment when it comes to biosecurity? Brian.
It's not that much directly related to biosecurity when we use our IT technology in the farmhouse equipment. The IT technology we have is more from remote access to the computers that control all the systems inside the poultry house. But this is more to monitor the operation and to troubleshoot whenever required. But it is not that much directly related to biosecurity. The biosecurity, what many people already mentioned in their earlier talks, is for the biggest part related to people. The people, the way they move around on the farm, to have proper instructions, how to operate the systems, how to keep the systems clean, etc. So it all starts for us the moment we start talking to a customer is the layout of his farm. Very often they have a drawing of a plot of land. They have a number of houses they want to put there. And then they come to us and say, look, I've got this plot of land. This is the capacity I want to build. What would you recommend as for a good layout of my farm, taking into consideration also the biosecurity? Once that stage has been passed and we've finally settled on the layout of the farm, then it comes to, once the equipment is delivered, it comes to training the people there, how to maintain the equipment, how to keep it clean, etc. And also how to have the movements on the farm. What I mentioned earlier on already, we try to reduce the number of people as much as possible, at least the entry of people into farmhouse as much as possible to decrease the risk of biosecurity problems.
Thanks, Brian. In that, looking into what you have just said, and also Bauke, and in fact, all of our panelists today, ladies and gentlemen, people training, that is so essential. Brian, there's a question. We have covered many questions of the audience, one not yet. If you look into people, as you said, or water, or air, or feed, could you give a percentage where the highest risks are when you look into biosecurity? Is that possible in general?
I saw the question and I didn't answer it because I find it very difficult. to attach a certain percentage to each one of these. But I will say that the largest percentage is people, because in many cases, people are always related also to the other points of risks mentioned.
Arjan, thank you, Arjan. When you look into people, water, air, feed, or whatever there is, what is easiest to achieve improvements in biosecurity? Where do you start first?
You have to know what you want to accomplish. So you have to get your objectives clear, get it communicated with people, and get it implemented in a positive way. It's not drilling; it's getting their people's mind and heart to get things executed. And then I think that's the basis. Yes, and whether it is a direct biosecurity program or thinking correctly about vaccination programs or yeah, all kind of things. It is that's the most important part.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to an end. I wanted to say almost, but it's just a minute after 2. So no, this is the end. Biosecurity, that's what we've been talking about today. Promising opportunities in the investment of the poultry industry between UAE and the Netherlands. And I think the final question that I addressed, what contamination is responsible for most of the risks and problems occurred when you look into biosecurity, is that people, water, air, feed, they are all important. We have seen people is number one. I think that we can conclude. And then what could we do together when it comes to investments between the Netherlands and the UAE? I'm sure, and that's also, ladies and gentlemen, how I know the companies in the panel that are on board today, they all have their expertise groups, people who know the workplaces locally in UAE and that can support you in training people. I think that's one part where we can actually really, Arjan, as you say, collaborate, work together. Ben, a final question for you to close this webinar. Do you have in the Netherlands teams, people that you, if you have a farm in UAE, can ask, invite to come, do an audit, help you, give advice? Is that possible?
Yes, Luan, of course that is possible. We always work closely together with Animal Health Organization in the city of Deventer here in the Netherlands. And if people are interested in starting a project together with one of the specialists or the veterinarians from that organization, they can always contact me or you, and I'm always willing to help them to set these contacts.
Thank you, Ben. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what you will see on the website of viv.net with regards to VIV MEA is a debriefing of this webinar with the highlights of what we have been discussing and more important presentations for as far as they are available, and also contacts. If you want to do the scan, if you would like to get an expertise team on ground, all of that information you can find over there. And I think that is the best way, looking into the invitation the ambassador made, to see practically how we can further cooperate in tackling biosecurity. Let's meet each other, not only as we have done during this hour, but merely also this afternoon and the coming days, weeks, whenever needed. The Netherlands is there to absolutely support the UAE when it comes to biosecurity, not because things are not well in order. No, we have learned that the situation in UAE when it comes to poultry farming is very advanced, very professional, and yet so much more we can mutually learn. And that's what we have seen today. I would like to thank all the panelists, of course, for the contribution and the preparation, because it always takes quite some preparation time. And of course, the audience for attending this session. We will have the next session that you will find information soon about. Let's see each other then again. Thank you.